Bing bong.
Bing bong.
This is the I, Dan Simpson Show.
We do it because it's right.
I love the dialectic.
His testicles became swollen.
Base.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
Please clap.
Who's this man? This man in the hat. I'm gonna ruin this.
You're a stupid baby, Dan. Not me.
Not me. All right, yes, viewers, welcome to the show. Really, really nice to be with you today. Love your face. Before we introduce our guest for the day, please, please, please support this content on Patreon. You can do it for as little as $3 a month. You'll get early access to these talks if you miss them live, and you'll be supporting independent leftist media. As we know, that is super important these days. It's one of it's super important. Otherwise, it goes away, and then you have no fucking clue what's going on, right? All right, so let's welcome to Leftist and Chill, my guest for the day, returning champion to the stream, lefty political and scientific conspiracy podcaster. We got Matt, DJ Tom Hanks. Please clap. Please clap. Let's go. What's up, Matt? How you doing today? What's up, Matt? Thanks for being with me. How are you?
Good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm usually, this is usually my recovery time. You know, we stream till 5 a.m.
You do?
I'm usually, like up around 10:30, and then it takes me an hour and a half or two to like get my brain working again.
Does coffee help you in the morning? How do you get going? What's your way to get going in the morning?
I'm fucking weird. Like I'm like I ingest like half a dozen different things like every day to have some effect of like coffee or whatever you'd call that. What's it called? Like not speedy, but the thing that coffee does. Like I've got a weird sort of chaotic system of it.
I feel like I want to dig down and ask more about that, but we brought you back on. You're a returning champion of the show. We had you on, like we mentioned before the jump, way back when I was starting my interview series. It's a lot different now, and it seems to take whatever form it wants to take whenever we have different guests on it. We just talk about lots of different things. Today, of course, we want to catch up, see what you're up to over there on the Unelectable Airwaves. Y'all stream every night. Y'all do the late night shift. It's wild, dude. And also you were elected to local school board. And maybe a lot of people don't even know what that's about. We can spell that out for them. We got, I think we can talk about Ukraine and Russia a bit, maybe talk about baby formula, and just generally speaking, what the left is supposed to do. How's that sound? Anything else we need to throw in there, Matt?
That's perfect.
All right, so Matt, why don't you introduce Unelectable Airwaves? Tell the folks what you do over there. You call it a conspiracy. Let me get this right. Yeah. Go ahead. You call it a lefty political and scientific conspiracy podcast. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I like to do the first half of the show. We usually go like, midnight till 4 or, sometime usually around 5 hours. But I like to do the first half, just like whatever's going on in the political world. Like we cover like the squad and stuff like that a lot because, Tony's into that. And I'm genuinely interested in that. Like, I want to improve things in somewhat, my goal is not like, I got kids, right? Like I want to see if we can make any of these kinds of improvements that we know desperately need to happen, right? Like I'm trying to get shit done, right? So like that stuff's important to us. And we talk about that a lot. Developments in there, like how, cracks in their armor, if we have progressives running, we cover like the Fetterman and Cisneros and stuff like that a lot. We don't really cover, like online drama as much. I'm sure, that gets the cheap clicks, but we're just like not into it, right? And then we start moving into, like a parapolitical, and we love our conspiracies, right? So we're constantly trying to get to the bottom of it. The
Yeah.
that New York Times Pentagon UFO story is unraveling. Did you see that?
I knew you'd be excited.
That is what I thought was happening, right? I was like, this is some sort of scam. I don't know what it is yet, but it's definitely scammy. And it looks like that fucking Elizondo guy, he was just a weirdo, like crank who sort of like was able to use his relationships and all to like make this story seem a lot more serious and important than it really was. And he fucking got the New York Times. He got all those. How many sources have you seen cover that?
Yeah.
And they were all wrong. This dude from the New York Post scooped them all. He went and fucking dug deeper and found it. It's nuts.
I'm not
So, yeah, that's the back half of the show.
100% sure. I'm not 100% sure what you're getting at here. Back it up here. Let's just spell this out here. And by the way, I really am interested about Tony's take on the squad, especially after the $40 billion. Anyways, the $40 billion of aid that they all unanimously agreed in the House to send to Ukraine. Some of which will end up in the hands of Nazis. And as we understand, there may be
were other,
unintended. I was saying that, Hillary. Unintended consequence. I was in the middle of. Exactly. That is the model that leaders are looking towards right now. Anyways, what am I trying to get at? The what? Someone had a scoop on it? What's the story? The story is just UFOs? Back it up.
Okay, so
yeah, spell it out. I'm done.
Famous story from 2017, right?
The one that looked like a little bug on the lens.
Yeah, well, the whole way that it came out in the front page of the New York Times, and it became very, international news, and they've been interviewing these same crowd of people over and over again, the sort of like Tom DeLonge adjacent crowd. They sort of misrepresented themselves.
Is this
the entire time? Yes.
On the trail of a secret Pentagon UFO program. Go.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So the journalists who were covering it noticed that the details were kind of screwy. And they were digging into it, and it was hard to FOIA stuff because they'd have like the name wouldn't quite be right. And they'd be like, well, wait a minute, this is calling it aerospace and this is calling it aviation. So it turns out that the program, the $22 million Bob Bigelow one, right? That thing had been, first of all, it was over by 2012, 2008 to 2012, I think it was. And it was pretty much 97% of it went towards funding the Skinwalker Ranch, like hoodoo voodoo, whatever they were doing there, right? And the UFO stuff was just sort of like a tiny little component that they did like in their spare time. Like I think they probably were the ones who received the, whenever reports came in. And the dude Elizondo who was on was not even really in the program. So after the program was officially canceled, he kind of continued, like they sort of passed the torch to him, like, oh man, we're getting canceled, but you have to keep the flame or whatever. So he took it upon himself. It was no longer funded, right? He took it upon himself to be the Pentagon's UFO guy, right? And sort of like claimed a bunch of clout he probably didn't really deserve. And then in 2017, when he quit, he said, like, oh, I have to quit because the Pentagon's not taking this seriously enough. And all along, I think what he was doing was setting up him and his friends, that TTSA crowd, to get their plan was to whip up Congress into a frenzy and be able to get them to fund a new program so that their consultancy, whatever their company, would be in prime position to get that next 22 million. They misrepresented themselves because if the New York Times had understood that the $22 million had gone to fund like some crazy shit, like if you ever read the stories about that original investigation that Skinwalker Ranch. It's like portals and Wolfman and the giant like beaver monsters and all kinds of crazy shit, right? Those guys claim they saw all this, and the research team had claimed to have incredible experiences, and it seems like Harry Reid, countenanced that at least somewhat, right? But it was like they got the New York Times to do the story because they left all that out. And they just said, oh, it's just a UFO program. We just check, anomalous, phenomena. And, it's funny now. They're all scrambling. Like all the UFO people on Twitter are all fucking fighting with each other and going back and forth. It's pretty nuts.
Really?
But the dude from the New York Post, he was the one who dug into it and put it all together.
Okay. So I think a lot of that's over my head. I wasn't following all that, but I don't know. Is there a TLDR version of what you just said? Too long, didn't read.
The program that was funded was for like much more crank shit than they let on, right? It was like cranked out, like beyond even UFO researcher. It was like people who believe in portals and Wolfman and cryptids and shit, right? That's what the program was actually doing, right?
Okay.
They lied and said it was a UFO program, right?
Oh.
And the guy who said he was the head of the program was actually not. It was just like a hobbyist, right? And the reason they got all these international publications to cover it was because they left out all the crazy shit and just talked about, oh, it's just a UFO program. We just do anonymous phenomenon. And that's how they got it to be such the sensation that it was, because they misrepresented themselves.
Okay. Counterpoint. The UFO shit is crazy as well, but I know you're into the
It's like you have to have, I think you need to have, like, I'm okay spending $22 million on an office that collects and gathers and looks for patterns in reports, right? I think that's fine, right? Like, I don't know what they were trying to do with the fucking Skinwalker Ranch. Like, I don't know. Like, I try not to like discount stuff that you haven't disproven. I try to like believe until it's disproven. So whatever, maybe they found something weird there. I don't know. But like the funding like a simple office that just gathers the reports in from the different branches of the military and looks at them and tries to find out what's going on. That's reasonable, Like, I think when you have people who are obsessed with this topic, right, which this crowd was, right, they're not objective, right? None of these people were.
All right. So this gives us a little bit of a taste of the kind of stuff that you dig into over there on Unelectable Airwaves. Tell us again when folks can find you streaming over there. You stream, you do a duo thing with Tony, and I think you were mentioning that sometimes you take over on your own. Go ahead and tell us about your hours again.
Yeah, we try to get on early every night and never succeed. Sometimes we'll go on by ourselves, one or the other.
Yeah.
But it's, usually we try to do it together. We have a little banter thing, I think I'm more of a, Marxist-Leninist, and Tony's more of a Soc Dem.
Yeah.
So we have a nice sort of dynamic. Sometimes we argue about stuff, but I think our show's fucking great. Like, I watch a lot of streams, and I'm telling it, like, in my unobjective opinion, I think it's fucking awesome. Like, I think it's perfect.
Awesome.
But you be the judge.
You're on late. Folks can find you late. And so, whenever I'm up, at weird, odd hours, I like to pop up your stream and hang out with y'all.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing unless you're doing the Wordle. I don't know. I hate Wordle.
Tony loves the quiz games. I like to get in and out. I like to do the quick Wordle and the song one, and then fucking back to the hard-hitting, serious content.
Yeah.
And Tony likes to do all the quiz games. He's got this points system.
Oh, no.
That he uses for, like, patronage points.
What?
It's totally corrupt. Yeah, artificial scarcity.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Fun for the whole family.
Yeah.
So we got a little taste of the what do we call the scientific conspiracy side of things. You also, I don't know, you're sort of into this thing that I'm sort of into, which is more the political conspiracy side of things, because for me, that's like something we have evidence. We've seen it, and then we can go, okay, now we actually do have patterns of this actual thing happening that we can start to pick up on, and and when you do that, you start to pierce the imperial veil, and when you do that, and by piercing the imperial veil, I'm talking, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm talking about like if you're talking about propaganda and you're talking about you're looking at an AP news article, or you're watching the BBC. That's probably imperial propaganda. You might be able to piecemeal some parts of the truth of the story together using those resources, but you're probably being propagandized. The way that they frame things is, usually building consent for imperial war, and that's not a good thing. Okay. Where was I going with this? Yeah, please.
I feel like is my latest conclusion. Like the Western media is just, I can't remember the last honest reporting I've seen. It's just various degrees of it. And it makes sense when you step back and realize that they're all owned by the same handful of transnational, neoliberal conglomerates that are pushing the American business model, finance capital, just hollowing out our economy and theirs and turning it into a couple giant holding companies that run everything. And that's who's putting this out. It's worse than state media is my new realization, right? State media at least has interest in line with the country. This is the interest of oil and weapons contractors.
Yeah.
Basically our export,
They're never marked as being paid in part or in whole by Raytheon, General Dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. Someone in chat asked if we're brothers. Is it just because we have mustaches? We're actually both from Chicago. They said you look like the California version of me. What is that all about? You just got you got cutoffs. You got the cutoffs.
I wear muscle tees all summer.
Fucking
I
huge.
have 2 seasons. I wear the long sleeve and t-shirt, the grunge style, and then when it gets hot, I wear cutoff.
Love it. I love this. I like how you got like a method to the madness. Love it. Yeah, you can hear Yoshimi screaming in the background. She's such a good girl, right? She's got everything she needs, everyone. Don't worry. So let's circle back now. I hate to disappoint conservative Twitter, but we're going to circle back. Yeah, I've been like getting into the political conspiracies. I like to dabble in that, you know what I mean? I feel a little bit of tinfoil hat thing from time to time, but guess what? Sometimes that shit comes true, man. And again, like we have examples of it, and we start to see the patterns over and over. I'd like to spend $22 million on, me seeing the patterns. They should pay me to see the patterns and tell people about the patterns, like you and me. Let's tell people about the patterns, right? All right. So with that said, like what patterns are you noticing? Let's go to Ukraine. Let's go to Russia, Ukraine. Speaking of media, it's been especially bad. I've noticed CBS has been so fucking bad during the since the Russian tanks rolled in at the end of February. CBS has been super bad. Before then too, but especially since then. I've checked out CNN. It's just like, oh my god, with the CNN, it's really really bad over there. Of the building and the manufacturing of war consent. War is a racket, and it doesn't manufacture its own consent. Media's got to do the work for them. And I've also noticed, hell, fucking Democracy Now! Does it, and I'm like, who the fuck do we trust, man? Like literally nobody. Like we just got to do it ourselves, right?
I kind of I mean, I'm coming around to, I think, if not overtly leaning on even the independent media too, right? There's this top-down consensus that everybody has to adhere to with regards to foreign policy, right? With regards to the imperial war machine, you have to be in accordance with the media, the CNNs and the Fox Newses and all that. Like they allow some sort of like, symbolic opposition a little bit between the two parties. It's kind of, I think, how they try to manage that, like controlled opposition, right? So you'll have a handful of Republicans will complain about government expense and, there's no oversight or whatever, but they're not actually, their concerns are not with the imperial war machine. Their concerns are about like the efficiency of it, right? And I think it's mostly just for show because they're all and align with, like, this is our business model. This is the late stage of the empire is getting these countries fucking drowning in IMF debt and take over their economies to pay it off, right? That's the business model. That 40 billion, that's not like, yes, it's being spent because they're like writing it off to them, but it's mostly that's their debt, right? So we have the ledger, the Swift ledger or whatever it is, and we mark them 40 billion in the hole and then start giving them, like, it's mostly appears to be giving them our old shit and then buying ourselves new shit and charging them for it, right? That's the business model, right? We get them fucking drowning in the IMF debt, the like development money, it's development money to help foreign capital extract resources, right?
Right.
It's here's money to build a road and a dam to power our mining operation, or this is a road to get our minerals to the port, right? Like, that's what we give them money for, billions and billions of dollars that they're in up to their eyeballs and they never get out from under it. So that's how you keep all these global South countries in line is, oh, you have this debt. It'd be a shame if you had to get your interest rate went up, or it'd be a shame if, you missed a payment and then we had to recalculate your balance.
Or
that's how they
you.
get these countries to fall in line. And then if you don't, that's exactly, if you threaten to exercise some independence or, take some control over your development, it's, the opposition party, there's humanitarian crisis. Maybe there's chemical weapons.
Women's rights.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Exactly. You see that with Mexico now. As soon as AMLO starts piping up, then it's, there's a human rights crisis in Mexico. And it's like, it's been there all along, and it's being enabled by the fucking, like, the international drug trade that American intelligence is an integral part of, right? So don't pretend that this is like a new thing. It's like with India, right? As soon as India turns against us in this foreign policy, debate here, this little bifurcation of the world, it's, India, they're human rights crisis. They're not being fair to their religion, right? Like, they're discriminating against this Muslim minority, right? And just kicks in the high gear, ramping it up as much as possible, and they use their monopoly of the media to pursue that, right? It's really sick, and it's really insidious, and it's very hard, I think, for people to see that larger framework and kind of break out of it. And, like, I don't have any loyalty to, like, my loyalty is just to the truth, right? Like, I just want the facts on the ground.
Yeah.
And the whole narrative around Russia doesn't really jive, right? Like, you can trace this sort of heightened tension with them, and it has much more to do with their, attempts to de-neoliberalize their economy, right? To sort of have more public ownership of their means of production, right? Okay. So, like, obviously the Soviet system was fully, state-run. And then the 90s period, we went in, Chicago boys, and just ripped it up and privatized everything. And then part of the main driver between this heightened tension in the Obama era was Putin sort of undoing a bunch of that, right? And that's why you see the more of his stuff that gets nationalized, the more of their industry they take off the global markets, the more they become, the bad guy, the threat. And, I think if you look at Ukraine, there's that stuff going on, and they've managed to use the ethnic tension that they did in the former Soviet world, right? Famously in Yugoslavia, those people all got along great when it was Yugoslavia. And the Soviet Union falls, or it was brought down, and all of a sudden everybody's at each other's throats. Why is that? It's the same shit. That's what they've been doing. So their business model is to get everybody at each other's throats and then fucking sell them stuff, get them trapped in debt with, you need these weapons to fight the, the Croatians, or, you got to fight the, this, whoever, this group here, those Russian speaking people. And they're able to weaponize those animosities to drive these conflicts. And then they have like puppet regimes in place that are going to heighten these tensions and continue putting their countries on the path towards war, right? That's, I think, what we're seeing pretty clearly with Ukraine, right? Is they were able to get this, militant far right faction, pump them up with, weapons and training, and allow them to exercise a, unearned influence on the country's political development. And that's where we're at now, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where we're at now with Ukraine. We can even talk about, the fucking Nazis in Ukraine. I've just gone on and on and on about that. That's really annoying. To have to keep relitigating that with people who seem to want to convince me that I should want to arm Nazis more. They seem to think that I don't want to do that enough. And I think the amount that I want to arm Nazis is the correct amount, which is less than 0.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not saying everyone in Ukraine's a Nazi. But of course, you got to say that, which shows you how sick the discourse is. Okay. I don't know.
They're basically holding hostage the normal people in their country. It's like they don't want this either, right? They have all these, it's the same way they have like the North Korean defectors and stuff, right? They have their token Ukrainian comes in to talk about all these sort of nationalist ideas, and that I don't think that's representative of the larger, mainstream opinions of the people there. They have these, violent diaspora sickos who are going to go and make it seem like everybody's just raving and just like baying for Russian blood. And I don't think that's it at all, right? I think they've been able to find the small percent of the population who does feel that way, and they've empowered them and, weaponized them, right? And they're just destroying their country and going to be in debt for generations because of it. So, yeah, I think us are the true friends of Ukraine, like the people who don't want it to be destroyed and gutted and fucking debt slavery for generations, right?
Right.
Everybody else is like trying to get them like, oh, we need to give them more weapons. We need to give them more weapons so they can be destroyed and like more of the country can be wrecked. And it's like really not that big of a deal. Like the things that the Russians and the Russian separatists were asking for is like pretty minimal, right?
Perhaps, yeah. No, I'm sympathetic with that. I think that it's tricky because our position is super demonized. Stop arming Ukraine, right? Oh, Dan, Matt, does that mean you want the Ukrainians to just give up and die? Like, shut up. Can we like have an actual nuanced conversation? Like, yes, we actually do care about the Ukrainian citizens. No, I'm not simping for Russia over here because I would also not simp for the United States or like Ukraine's military or leadership, right? We're simping for the people on the ground, and the way that we do that is by demanding that this war ends as soon as possible, and at that point you got to start asking tough questions. How did we get into this to begin with? And when people go, we have to support Ukraine, that is pretty much the biggest red flag that their understanding of the situation begins February 25th or so, 2022. It does not go back 8 years. Like we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. This war's been going on for 8. It's a proxy war. We don't officially have like U.S. Like boots on the ground. There's some like individuals and probably some CIA clandestine ops that we can probably assume that are going on until proven otherwise. But what am I trying to get at here? What I'm getting at is we're 8 years into this. How long is this going to go? By advocating for sending more arms to Ukraine, by advocating for oh my God, something unthinkable, a no-fly zone over Ukraine, U.S. or NATO jets engaging with Russian jets over Ukrainian skies. It's always over the skies of another country, by the way, all these people advocating for sending arms and U.S. intervention, by the way. Right, so, okay, where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is, like, how long does this go? It goes on for as long as we keep sending arms. The $40 billion that we just, or I think that they're deciding on sending, is that I think it needs to get through the Senate, right?
Yeah, Rand Paul was.
Rand Paul held it up.
Block on it. I think that's just
Comrade Rand Paul.
I think that's like I was saying earlier, they allow some controlled opposition resistance, but it's very symbolic, and I think points to a larger problem with politics in this country is the Democrats are sort of pushing forward this neoliberal, financialized, capitalist version, and that's dominating all of their politics. They're just firmly entrenched with these weapons manufacturers and the mainstream media and these people who are driving this imperial war machine. That's not popular. People don't like that. Like people are distrustful of them because of it, right? Because their stuff doesn't help the domestic people who are struggling, right? All of this stuff is meant to further the interest of the empire, but it's not in line with regular people, right? So they're forced to sort of make themselves look appealing with that context going on, that they're pretty much sole agenda item is perpetuating this system, right? Like, which results in them propping up the share prices and all that. But like, I think it's really about sort of like the free trade imperialism, right? Is making sure that these global South economies stay opened up to the ravages of financialized capitalism, right? Like we have to keep the gravy train going, right? We can't pull out, we can't back away, we can't, like, they can't have, like, part of the stuff that's so frustrating to them, or frustrating is probably not the right word, like, I always give the example of Russia with the sanctions, where they couldn't get cheese anymore from Lithuania, right? So they were sanctioned, and what did they do? They started their own domestic cheese processing, right? Actually, the sanctions resulted in them having an improved economy. Like, you wouldn't know that from any of the stuff you see on TV, but like, it's just purely focused on GDP growth and not, economic stability, any kind of independence, any kind of ability to have any kind of internal control over the way your like productive capacities are being marshaled. And that's a threat to them because they're, you can't have anything else function. You can't have anything work good, right? Like you can't have any country buck the global hegemon and then succeed, right? So it's, Russia's a failing economy. They all suck. Like they're all destitute and poverty stricken. I don't think that's true, right? I really don't. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that, especially now with, Belt and Road, China on the scene, giving these countries an alternative. Like you're seeing countries in Latin America that would have traditionally have taken more and more IMF money and just sunken further and further in debt and had more and more of their economy owned by American interests. Now they have another option on the table. So if they need to do a new project, they can take $1 billion from the IMF and give up a huge amount of their sovereignty, right? Like IMF deals, you have to they tell you who to fire, who to hire, who to put in this position. You have to privatize this aspect of your country's governance. You have to lay off these people. You have to cut your pensions X amount, right? All of that stuff is written into the IMF deals. But if China is saying, "Oh, hey, we'll give you the money, but we want no strings attached," who's not going to take that? Who's going to take this position where you've seen nothing but carnage and destruction from this business model? It's like, that's the thing that pisses me off the most is this stuff doesn't work. We've seen it over and over again. We know exactly what's going to happen if you let the IMF in, if you work with them in this, financializing your economy. It's just going to make you like any other. You've seen what this happens. We've run this experiment, right? And yet we have these fucking morons who don't understand that. They can't just like look at the numbers and understand what was happening. And they're kind of, driving sort of this whole national conversation. It's very frustrating. And I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen. We talk a lot about like Latin American solidarity, like maybe if they had like, a sort of like a good, like a good EU kind of thing, but for Latin America, right, where they had you be able to sort of resist the regime change options and make it harder for them to control the political sphere. That would be nice. I don't know. I feel like we debate this a lot. Like, would Brandon go do a regime change if he was losing control? Like, if they tried to do like a Latin American union, would they go in there and find some human rights atrocity?
Oh, right. Yeah. Dig something up.
Yeah.
Sort of reminds me, I think, of the Third World Movement in the 60s, right? A lot of really based people started working on that. That didn't exactly pan out. The Bandung Conference, is that ringing any bells? Okay.
Yeah, the non-aligned.
Okay, cool, yeah. That didn't exactly pan out. Lumumba was murdered, and they fucked with Nasser, the whole thing. Well, it sounds like you're like explaining... All right, don't take me too seriously here. But maybe Adam Smith was right. Maybe the capitalists were right. The invisible hand of the market. What am I trying to say? The free market. You know what I mean? Competition. Maybe competition's good because we had IMF, World Bank model. And guess what? They didn't have competition. There was no one else, right? And now China's come along. Then finally they have competition. And maybe they're right about competition being good.
I mean, we hear so much about, they're enslaving Africa with debt. They're debt traps and all. I don't think that's true.
That's imperial projection. So yeah. We know what's evil because we're very familiar with it because we've been doing it.
I mean, if people had a better understanding of this, they wouldn't be supporting it, I think. And I think they rely on people being the mystification process that goes on with the mainstream media.
Man, I'm a dumb guy, dude. I'm a fucking dumb guy. Like, it's incredible that I've learned anything about all of this, but I've figured it out. I still got a lot to learn. But I've like figured out how like IMF, World Bank, Bretton Woods, the United States global hegemon, and NATO, EU, they're working in like a global mafia, and it really helps me to just sort of conceptualize it like that. Like if you think how a mafia works sort of like locally, just explode that out to the global scale. They're working like a global mafia. Oh, what a nice country you have there. Would be a shame if you lost that country that you have there, right? Volodymyr Zelensky, excuse me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they do it all over the world, and it's the same model, and they do it every single time. And this is the pattern that shit libs don't understand. They don't get it. Otherwise, again, they wouldn't support it.
Yeah.
You would think.
The whole NGO, the civil society aspect of it, it's like, that's the whole thing about conspiracy, too, is like, we know this stuff because it's eventually declassified in other countries, right? It's going to happen here, too. From what's already been revealed, it's already pretty damning. But, like, you're going to see the rest of it soon enough, right? And then all these people calling us conspiracy theorists and, Russian stooges and all, they're going to be disproven, but then it'll be too late and it won't matter. Like, we've seen this happen before. It's like, this is not new. This intervention, this current series of interventions is exactly in a pattern of all the other one. Like we know what they're doing here. We can point it out in advance while it's happening, and nobody wants to hear that. People don't like having their worldview disrupted at all. They like, the world is as, Anderson Cooper told me it was or whatever. And when you fucking rock the boat a little bit, they don't like it.
They really don't. I just have to say to anybody that happens to be listening in, if you're listening in to me, I don't know, I'd really like to hope that you don't watch corporate media But if you are listening to me and you do watch corporate media, just stop. Your understanding of the world will probably improve. Because they do this thing where they misinform you, but they give you this feeling where if you're not really informed, you feel like you're getting informed, but you're not. And in fact,
That's right.
You have to understand that there's the profit motive that's involved with that. So you have to support independent leftist media. Hopefully me, hopefully this channel or Unelectable Airwaves or someone else, because yeah, we have to pay our bills, but like we don't have the profit motive like they do. I'm got some autoplay going over here. I'm so sorry about that. Right? Like me trying to like pay my rent isn't the same as like CNN manufacturing consent and their CEOs walking home with making bank. These are completely different things, and I hope y'all understand that. Okay, I want to make sure we've covered everything that you want to talk about in terms of the Ukraine-Russia, the war, the proxy war. In fact, that's a perfect example. I called it a proxy war 2 months ago, and people are like, "Oh, you're doing Putin propaganda," and I'm like, "Well, just look at all the media, like literally in the past few years, and they're talking about it, calling it a proxy war. Of course, they've stopped now because they don't want to be called a Putin propagandist, but you can look back, and then actually now, like, they're starting to say it more and more and more. Like on Democracy Now, they're like going, is this a proxy war? Let's bring on our guest. But of course, they weren't really saying that 2 months ago. Okay, so that's a perfect example, I think, of why you should stop listening to corporate media. What else do we need to make sure we touch on?
I am fighting the culture war on the scoreboard now.
Congrats.
I'm going to make the kids all fucking, do white guilt and be groomed.
Yeah. No! Matt, they're gonna cancel my show. Okay, you're gonna do the CRT.
I'm gonna be normal, do normal stuff that the vast majority of parents are in agreement with, and not the nonsense the sickos on TV. Like, they have to find shit to get you hooked, right?
Yeah.
They need a wedge issue. They need to be able to something to grab you and say, "Oh, the Democrats, they're dropping the ball," right? They need to have something for that. So this is what they fell on recently is, oh, the schools. They're not treating your kids right. We have to stop funding this and privatize it. We need charter schools, right? That's all the same thing domestically. It's like we've seen this before. We know what they're doing, Stop letting them control the conversation.
Okay, so to reel that back, we're talking about the sort of movement here in the United States. Lots of folks, especially on the right, they're going wild at the school board meetings, screaming at the people, threatening them. A lot of school board members are like quitting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're noticing this, and you're like, all right, well, maybe I'll step up as someone on the left to try to be a counterbalance. And so you ran for local school board at an elementary school. We have LSCs at all of our schools here in Chicago, and those are made up of community members and parents and like a staff
Teachers
from the school.
And staff,
and you ran and at your student's school, your own child's school, and as a parent, and you won. Congrats, right? That's the idea.
Yeah.
All right, W.
Yeah.
Let's see the W's in chat. You love to see it.
DSA, our local DSA endorsed 17 candidates, and I think 16 of us won.
Now that's the kind of like electoralism that I want to see DSA doing, not the House. I don't want DSA supporting someone that like goes and agrees to send $40 billion of arms to Ukraine, or agrees that we should fund the Iron Dome in Israel, right? I don't want those fucking. I don't want DSA touching any of that, and it honestly makes me not want to be part of DSA.
I mean, it's a local org, right? The national, I think, organization doesn't really function. It's not really an effective like national political advocacy group, right?
Say that again.
Local level, they're great. Your local chapter is like our Chicago DSA is fucking awesome. Probably the best group in the city, right? And a lot of other cities have similar, right? But trying to sort of like exercise control over our elected reps on a nationwide level is not really plausible, feasible right now, right? So they kind of have to go with the flow a little bit. And, we know how powerful these different lobbies are, right? It's like They are going to undermine us and marginalize us at every opportunity they can get. They will use division within our ranks to, exacerbate the tension, to complicate the problems. They're going to keep doing that, right? And having, a small contingent of them in Congress, I think, has been helpful in some ways, but it's also been counterproductive because it's allowed them to find new avenues to demonize us. But I mean, I think that's by far our best bet right now. Everybody should join their DSA and, get involved as best they can. We're going to need something larger to organize around at some point. I think, PSL is pretty good. I don't know what kind of relationship we can get with them in terms of, having a left-wing party. I'm pretty black-pilled on the, achieving any kind of change through electoral means at this point, right? They're
well, you mean at the higher level? I mean, you just did electoral. You just did it. You mean like higher up? You go. That's where I'm at. Like the
national. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't really have a solution there, other than what we've already said about the local level, but I want people to understand that part about it, though, right? That the national and the local are completely different entities, and you shouldn't let, like you're saying about their failure to hold their reps accountable. I don't think that should let you throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
The baby formula out with the. there's probably a joke there somewhere.
Baby formula. That's sad. It's funny because it's sad.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
don't know.
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. No. I was just driving there. Just talking about how we got some national folks that are voting for the Iron Dome. They're voting all of the House Dems, including Elon, including AOC, Tlaib, Bowman. I can't remember her name. But they all voted for it. What happened in the Senate? Rand Paul blocked it. What happened what about Biden, Bernie? Why did Rand Paul block it but not Bernie?
Vladimir Putin is a dictator, and we have to fight him over there, so we don't have to fight him here.
He said that. What is Bernie's take on this whole thing? Yeah, I haven't heard much from him on this.
He seems to have been in lockstep with everybody.
Fucking shit.
I don't know. I kind of feel like people like him and Bowman to an extent and all, they are sort of doing like a triage thing, we will keep quiet about this issue so we can address these 10 other issues. I think we've seen how powerful this sort of faction of the ruling class is. I don't know what you would call them, the sort of the inheritors of like the Dulles wing of the deep state, that's what I think is driving the train here. And we saw how ruthless they are, right? Like they will fucking kill a president, right? They have no problem lying, cheating, stealing, all that stuff. And it's even more sort of privatized and decentralized now. So it's a lot harder for them, someone like Bernie, to sort of, you couldn't do a church committee now, right? It's like set up in such a way that like everything is privatized. This aspect is here. This other intelligence gathering operation is there. And that's the other thing too, is there's these fucking like oligarchs doing their own sort of intelligence operations now too, which is really dystopian. So I don't necessarily blame Bernie for going along with this, keeping, like I said, keeping the imperial war machine running. I think he would be fucking murked, right? Or, somehow, there's a Me Too about Bernie or whatever it would be, something. There's a lot of other good that we can do without addressing this central contradiction. I think the imperialist war machine is the central contradiction of the neoliberal era, right? I mean, there's a good argument to be said for how much more radicalizing it would be if Bernie was more honest about the imperialism, right? Because the kind of thinking has been, I'll keep quiet about that so I don't get fucking Kennedy'd, and so I can try to address these dozen, numerous other problems that we're dealing with, right? And I mean, there's good arguments on both sides. I try not to judge too critically. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not sure, again, because I sort of haven't heard Bernie speak on this too directly, but it would seem that perhaps this is the case. I'm going to highlight this again. Social democracy consistently bows to imperialism. We know that, the Nordic model. Bernie voted for NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. This is in that lane. And that's very disappointing.
He sucked him. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people who think he's hiding his power levels, like he's going along with that because of utilitarian considerations, and other people think that's just where his politics are at, right? I don't know. He seems to be very, like I said, weighing, calculating, sort of like, people have criticized him before for the F-35 in Vermont, that kind of stuff. Like he's definitely benefited from it in some points.
Real quick, what happened with the F-35 in Vermont? Yeah.
Yeah, like a lot of it was, I think that was like the central state from the program, right? It was one of this famous shit show of a program. The bulk of the work, I think, was done in Vermont.
Oh, no.
And people have used that against him, that he, I don't actually know how he got that into Vermont. I kind of think that was the other senator who had negotiated that deal. Leahy, or the guy before Leahy, right?
Okay.
That, but he's, his state has benefited from it, so people have said that's why he keeps quiet about it. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but like I said, it's a tricky business for him, man. Like this is like, it's basically like the one, like they're on a par with the Third Reich. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of evil that we're dealing with here. And there's one good guy, like the one good guy in a room full of Nazis. What did you expect him to do, right?
Not go along with the Nazis. Bernie denounced Nicaragua, Venezuela. I just think people need to be honest about Social Democrats being great on labor issues, but fall in foreign policy consistently. He's pretty much like the Amy Goodman of politics. You know what I mean? Like gets some things right, gets most things right domestically, shits the bed when it comes to U.S. imperialism. It just, I don't know. Like the way that he talks, it just sounds like he's just doesn't demonstrate to us that he wants that he's piercing the imperial veil. Okay. Yeah.
It would be nice though.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Like the way he pushed back on Bolivia, if he was also willing to push back on Nicaragua with that same fervor, the Nicaragua situation, like I don't know if you're following that story with the conference in the Americas.
Yeah, a little bit.
And AMLO.
Yeah. There's
boycotting it.
A couple people said today they weren't going to go. A couple different. The
Caribbean. I think it's called the CAF, right? It's like the Caribbean Federation. Them and now AMLO both said that they would boycott it if Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua weren't invited. And I don't think Brandon's going to cave, but he might. I mean, I don't know. He should, obviously. Yeah. But, like, it's weird because AMLO's been pretty good on some things, but then we just covered the story last night. He kind of snubbed Nicaragua on his... He just did a bunch of, like, diplomatic visits to a bunch of different countries, but he left Nicaragua off the list. And
Antigua and Barbuda as well will not attend.
Yeah. The rationale behind why Nicaragua is supposedly undemocratic is the weakest of them all, right? Like the Nicaragua story is that there's coup plotters, people who tried to do a coup and they got caught and put in jail, and they were, I think, like the 5th or 6th most popular political faction at the time, like way down the list, right? And supposedly because they were locked up for doing a coup, that was undemocratic because it was locking up the opposition parties. like so tenuous, right?
What?
Like at least for the other ones, there's like they've sort of fabricated evidence of cheating or some sort of dishonest practice or whatever. Not, I mean, obviously not really, right? But like,
Yeah.
I feel like their rationales for why Cuba and Venezuela are, undemocratic or whatever, are much more thoroughly developed. Like the Nicaragua story is so half-ass, right? And like not, that's like Trump era, McCarthyism or, his anti-communist activities were pretty sus, pretty shitty.
And this is stuff that I'm only learning about because I've started to watch Telesur a little bit more regularly. And they just tell you shit that Western media refuses to tell you. And then you start to go, oh, well, why does... And this is just one example. I think Ukraine is probably the most glaring example of differences of how they're talking about things. And again, I don't necessarily 100% believe what Telesur is saying to me when they disagree with Western media, but at the same time, we have more reason to believe them than Western media. And at the some time, they do seemingly better coverage of these kinds of things. So it's been fascinating.
Too.
Please.
RT's pretty good, right? And
well, how do you watch RT these days?
The whole project of demonizing them, the whole Russiagate, the last 5 years, I think was all part and parcel of the same agenda, right?
Yes.
They make it seem like RT's not a legitimate source. They're just uncontrollably biased. Like they can't possibly have good reporting because they're so swayed by the, the Putinist, authoritarians or whatever. They were one of the few sources that was covering this, like anti-imperialist actions around the world. Pretty good. Like I'm sure there's some problems with them, but like try comparing like an RT broadcast from 6 months ago with whatever the other jokers were saying and see who's who presents a more accurate vision of reality. You'll see it's RT. That's why they had this extensive project to vilify them, right?
Mm-hmm. It all makes sense now, and of course you got people like Malcolm Nance, like Navy CIA adjacent people like hanging out on CBS talking to them, and they're like, it's just so wild. I don't know what I'm trying to get at here.
Kiriakou said he was a faker, that he wasn't actually part of any counterterrorism group at the CIA.
Wait, who?
John Kiriakou. He was a former CIA agent turned whistleblower.
He said that Malcolm Nance was like a faker?
Yeah, he said he talked to him backstage on Fox. I think he said Tucker. I forget what show he was going on.
Yeah.
But they met back in the green room at Fox one time, and he was like asking him questions about, oh, what unit were you in and shit like that. And he had no clue. He was all of his answers were all fake. He didn't have any legitimate answers. It was all, nonsense.
That is wild. Here's my clip on Malcolm Nance. I had the wrong one. Yeah. I don't know. I think he's sussy. I definitely think he's sussy.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, yeah.
He's probably part of some other, he's probably not part of the counterterrorism operation. He's probably part of some sort of other, like, PSYOP division or whatever, I
think so.
Consent building division, whatever that's called.
Right. They call that the Chomsky Battalion.
Yeah.
He's a wild guy, just wild. I can't believe what CBS is doing with them. All right, where do we go from here, Matt? What do we have left to talk about here? Yeah,
I mean, I can keep going whenever you want.
All right. Baby formula. Baby formula.
Have you been following this?
A little bit, not really, not closely. There's a place, Abbott Labs is making like baby formula, and there was some contamination. They were told about it. They didn't do anything about it. 2 babies died, and then finally they shut it down. And so this is one of the reasons people were running out of baby formula on the shelves. Is that the idea?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
it's one
partly
facility?
It's because of the consolidation. It's like every other industry, right?
Oh, just what can go
massive
wrong?
Consolidation, right? 4 companies running all the baby food, baby formula for the whole country, 350 million people. And shocker, they prioritized stock buybacks and shareholder value over effectively running your, effectively running the one job you had. It's like there's no excuse to have this much consolidation in this area because baby food is not a complicated process, right? And there's some argument to be made about like backlogs and the FDA or whatever is what the chuds are trying to say. And that's obviously not true. Like the FDA is one of the few areas of the government that actually does a pretty good job, Lately, they've been fucking it up because the money, like the revolving door has been kicked up and there's been more money sort of circulating, adjacent to it. But they are one of the few parts of empire that is still like effectively doing its job. And, like other countries rely on their work a lot too. So that's one of the few responsible areas of international operation that I think the government's still doing. And they, what are they supposed to do, right? It's like the problems are with the company, right? They found the problem, they identified it, and instead of doing anything with it, they just continued to extract more value from the company without putting in any unnecessary maintenance. Like we're going to be seeing this, I think, more and more. I guess it's the same sort of idea with the fires in California. That was caused by the company refusal to do regularly scheduled maintenance because it cost money and they would rather spend that money on stock buybacks, right? That's these executive class, that's their sole goal, it's their sole responsibility is driving up the share price through any means necessary. Like that's the defining characteristic of an effective executive is how high can you push that share price up. So the Abbott people, they're like, oh, fuck, it's going to cost, $50 million to fix this machine when we would rather, I think the number was $5 billion. They did $5 billion in stock buybacks, right? And they couldn't part with, a very small portion of that to do the maintenance on these machines that had to be done. They had to spend every cent of it just driving up those share prices more and more. And that's the same thing that Con Ed did in California. So we're going to see that more and more as these companies are put with the choice of, do I, take the hit that eventually come for neglecting this and pay a few $1 million fine or whatever, or put in the investment that has to go to keep the company running. I think you're going to find, like I went to law school, graduated a few years ago, and I was coming out. It was a different environment because it seemed like a lot of the internal law departments were no longer, companies weren't keeping their own law department anymore, right? It used to be they would have their own team internally, and then if they had a big case, they would, bring in outside forces. They don't really do that anymore. They just hire, they were going to hire 6 lawyers. Now they hire 1 lawyer and 5 additional salespeople or marketing people or whoever to drive up the profit, because if they get caught and they get in trouble for not doing some sort of compliance or not doing, whatever the lawyer's job previously was, they just pay the fine, right? It's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission, right? That's kind of, that model has been dominating lately when you see this lack of accountability for the government to refuse to hold any of these corporate ghouls responsible for anything. So it's, this sort of dynamic is, I think, is being replicated at various levels of the economy, all up and down, right? Is shirking responsibility to make profits, and the punishment. Oh, this government, this local bureaucrat was supposed to be enforcing this, but he looked the other way, and now he's an executive at the company, right? That sort of pattern you're just going to start seeing over and over and over again as people like give up trying to actually, do anything, do their job, right? I think that's the dynamic everyone should look out for. It's coming. It's, and Part of it is because the right has been able to demonize the government effectively and constantly tell people how bad the government is at everything. And that's allowed them to have cover in the media for when stuff like this happens. It's like we're seeing with the baby formula. It's very clearly a problem to do with corporate greed. It's very clearly the type of practice that should have been outlawed, that wasn't outlawed, and it led to them biting us in the ass, right? Instead, you have all these people obfuscating on TV, talking about the FDA and talking about this, and this is this government failure and that government failure. No, this is fucking corporate greed, plain and simple. And all these people are out there trying to cover for it because this pattern replicates all over the economy, and people are going to continue doing this, and it's going to continue getting away with it, you know?
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
It's that profit motive gets in the way every time. You know, this sounds sort of really similar to like a lot of the problems that we're having with the supply chain because of the choices of capital owners. They sort of consolidate their businesses in every which way imaginable. That means that we are getting more and more into an economy that's like an on-demand economy. We don't have like warehouses full of things, you know, on you know, back up and ready to go in case we need them, in case something happens, in case we have a pandemic. Do we have masks ready to go? No. Way to go, economy. We've really chosen a really bad way of going about doing things. And, you know, perhaps if there were, you know, what is the left to do then? Matt, what's the left to do? We got a couple minutes left. I hope you have a couple minutes left. You can go if you like. I know we're a little over our time here, but like, what are we to do? What's the left to do? I think the answer is, generally speaking, we want to organize so that we can have a centralized economy where these decisions are being made in a centralized way instead of by individuals, and then we all just sort of like cross our fingers and then hope that all the individuals making individual decisions, you know, works in a way for all of us. You know what I mean? I think this is a really bad way of going about doing things. The whole fingers crossed method. A hope and a prayer is capitalism. Neoliberal capitalism. A hope and a prayer.
I mean, I think what we've seen in other places in social democracies, strong labor movement, strong worker unions have been able to push back on some of this stuff to an extent. But the way that our, you know, organized labor has been systematically cut out of any decision-making opportunities with, you know, they might be able to fight for a few more scraps for their workers, but they're not going to be able to, you know, make sure the company is being run properly, right? I think that's the kind of thing that I think labor used to have power like that on the shop floor, right? I think back in the day, they used to be able to use their influence to force the management to, you know, fix glaring problems like that, to make it a safer environment. Now they barely, I don't know what the unionization situation was with any of these, you know, baby formula plants, but I imagine there's probably minimal. I think like our only opportunity, I think the only thing that actually bothers them, I think they don't like people protesting at their house, sure, but like the only way to actually challenge power is organizing labor, right? That's the only way. And they will lie and obfuscate and deceive us extensively to discredit the labor movement. You'll see some of these people trying to, you know, do like id poll shit and stuff with the labor union, like, oh, that's a white man's union, that kind of thing, right? That is like their response to it, and people are susceptible to that, you know, just like whenever there's any kind of claim against Israel, it's all, oh, what are you, anti-Semitic, right? That's the same shit they do with labor unions, and we have to be wary of that, right? Obviously, but we have to like understand that that's the only source of worker power. You know, like we can yell and scream at their houses and they might be annoyed by that, but they're not going to like, that's not actually fucking with their money, you know? So that's always been our only option. And any kind of like deception and obfuscation about that in recent years has been deliberate.
All right. Love to hear it. Matt, folks can find you streaming on Unelectable Airwaves every night. Just about every night? Did I get that wrong? Every night?
Every night.
Awesome. Every night?
If one of us can't make it, the other one does it by themselves.
Nice. We got the link there in the chat. They can follow you at DJ Tom Hanks as well. How else I'm sorry, you were also recently elected to local school council. Big W there. Any way that my viewers can support you and your stream other than by watching you and supporting there? Well, any way we can help you?
We have I've been pushing our Telegram channel, but I don't know if there's anybody's in there yet. We have a subreddit. I mean, just search Unelectable Airwaves. You'll find us on most platforms. Cool. But yeah, I think y'all should tune in if you're up late. I think you'd like it. I mean, I think, like I said, I think it's sick. I mean, the podcast is still out there. We don't do it as much as we used to. Maybe I try to do like one a month, right? As opposed to 2 a week. That's, it's just a pain in the ass, right? So like, we're just, we're pretty, I'm pretty, lazy and shy. I don't like go and, I'm uncomfortable like reaching out to people and asking them to come on the stream, So I don't do that as much as I should. But if anybody has any ideas for guests or people who'd want to come talk, hit us up, please. Don't be afraid to reach out. Like, we're super chill and super nice. Just awkward about the setting up collaborations.
Oh, for sure. That's a weird thing. I just me, I got my little Calendly link, and I feel like that empowers me to just be like, hey, if you want to come, you can come. If not, sign up if you want. Otherwise, bye-bye. But for sure. Yo, awesome. Yeah, you do great content over there. Stoked to be with you. Are you we talked about this last time. Are you an actual DJ? Are you DJing these days?
I haven't been.
Yeah.
I used to do like before the pandemic, I would do like a few events, like stuff through school or like family and local, like graduation parties and stuff.
Yeah.
I used to DJ. I was on college radio in LA, and I was at like fucking fancy nightclubs a couple nights a week. Like, that was my job for years, was just DJing, and it was awesome. Yeah. I loved it. I had a great time, and I kind of just, when I moved back to Chicago, not back to Chicago, like I had lived in New York and LA and DJed in both of those cities and had worked my ass off to get established there. And by the time we got to Chicago, I just didn't have it in me to go out and like schmooze a bunch of like club promoters and stuff. Yeah. Like, I just didn't do it. So I'm not like in the clubs anymore.
Okay. Awesome. But you got your work cut out for you over there at your school, your LSC, your local school council. You're going to be working there. People can catch you late night. Matt, thank you for being with us today. It was a pleasure talking with you. I really hope people chimed in and heard the conversation that we had. It's just sort of like important, I think, for people like me just about a year and a half ago to listen into conversations like this. Not everything was making sense, but I was starting to piece some things together. Maybe this is serving that purpose for some others. Otherwise, I think we learned a lot today, and I had a blast talking with you. We got to get you back on sometime, and we'll do this again. Maybe you and I, maybe you'd be interested in this other model that I've been doing, where we check out democracy now, and we could talk about how they frame the news and the good and the bad, and the ugly. Yeah. Cool. All right, Matt, we're gonna let you go. Thanks so much for being with me. Thank you for your time. My man, peace and solidarity. Love your face. Let's do this again. All right. That's Matt, everyone. Say goodbye. That was a good one. See you later, Matt. Peace out, bud.
Bye.
Thank you, patrons.